It's a simple fact. Some ideas stick in the minds of consumers, students, and your audience, and some don't. Simple ideas are ideas that can break through the clutter. But simple isn't as easy as it sounds. Charles Mingus, a fabulous jazz musician, has a quote that I adore. Making the simple complicated is commonplace. Making the complicated simple, awesomely simple, that's creative. I think what Charles is talking about here is the inherent complexity involved with making an idea simple enough for a large number of people to understand its core concepts. Again, simple and easy are not equal. So why simple? Why is simple important? First of all, simple ideas stick. When stripped to its core elements, there's less for the mind to wrap itself around, and that idea can persevere. It gives a guide for action. 1, 2, maximum 3 simple rules can guide a lot of your actions, whether it's in life or it's at work. If you look at the Golden Rule, which has similarities in many of the world's religions, that simple idea of doing unto others as you do we would like done unto yourself, that gives a whole billions of people a guide for moral action. And finding the core means truly understanding that idea to its most basic components. An engineer who is truly skilled at his job or her job will be able to strip extras and accessories and added values until that design is its most simple core functionality, and then and only then can vary that design based on what consumers need. And finally, simple means prioritizing. There's a lot of important ideas in the world, but what are the most important? And are you remembering them? And finally, and I'll reiterate this over and over again, simple does not mean easy. If you look at what one needs to lose weight, you simply eat less and exercise more. But is that easy? Simple's enemy? Knowledge. That's right. And Chip and Dan Heath in their book Made to Stick talk about the curse of knowledge. And until I read their book, I didn't really understand what this means. But the more we know about something, the more that we become an expert about something, the more we understand the gradations of important. In middle school, understanding how an atom works is very different than a physicist's or a nuclear biologist's understanding or a nuclear chemist's understanding of how an atom works. So as we understand more and more, the nuances of information become more important, and it becomes actually more difficult to explain an idea's core essence to a group of people. Different perspectives are certainly important. I had a fantastic class last week where students were discussing the kind of business models that were being discussed in the class, and they could see the business models from a variety of different perspectives. But when you're speaking to, for example, an introductory student in business, are all those permutations of those models truly the most important thing for them to remember? It's the complexities that we become enamored with the closer we get to expert knowledge or further knowledge. Simple not being easy. You look at a plaything, right? Something that children can play with. And a ball is a very simple conception of that. But a beach ball is certainly not something that's easy. Finding the core means stripping down to the most important element. In this case, this ball is tossed back and forth. Play. Physical play. That's what it means. So stripping the idea down to its most critical essence. I'll take strategic management for an example. Strategic management is about direction. And if there's nothing else that my students understand about strategic management, if there's nothing else that your executive team understands about strategic management, perhaps it's that it's about direction. It's the ability finding the core is the ability to choose the most important concept from all the really important concepts. I don't think any expert would argue that there aren't multiple important concepts within one idea. But to truly get an idea to stick, it's important to put a stake in the ground and say, this is the most important one. So how do you get there? Again, not an easy proposition. Well, first is to ask yourself some questions. What is your intent? Regardless of the circumstances. So if you look at a business and their intent in today's marketplace, generally you want to hear about growth. You want to hear about growth in jobs, revenue, profit, employability, all right, reputation, awareness. So if growth is that primary intent, perhaps when we're talking to the executive team, we can ask these questions. If we do nothing else during the lesson, perhaps you're doing executive training, we must chart a path to a new market in an international location. The way that you get there to that intention could change, vary by month, by quarter, by year. But the intention of that simple command to increase market share in an international market remains. So the single most important thing we must do tomorrow to meet this objective is what? What's your answer to that? Getting to the core means choosing one, not three, not two, not multiple, but the one most important intent, so that decisions can be made. I can say that my intent is to teach. Okay? That doesn't give me any decision-making power. If we do nothing else during this training session, we must chart a path to grow market share in international locations. If I have an opportunity to gain a little bit of market share in the Dallas market, and I have a chance to, although more difficult, establish market share in India, given this intention, I know what decision to make. What's in, what's out. This works in your personal life as well. For example, one of the core essences of who I am, my brand, is about education, personally. So if I get, and I do, hundreds of requests a year for volunteering at my children's schools, I can choose, nope, this doesn't have to do with their education. Nope, this doesn't have to do with education. This is fundraising, or this is event planning. If they need help with literature circles, or teaching a lesson, or being a guest lecturer, I can start to prioritize those, because if there's one thing I want to stand for at my children's school, it's education. So if you're talking about training, or teaching, or writing an article for a newspaper, a memo, a proposal, using the journalistic idea of the inverted pyramid becomes very important. And here, the area of the pyramid that is the widest does not have to do with the amount of information, like we might tend to go to as knowledge experts, as subject matter experts, but instead it has to do, directly correlates with the importance of the idea. So the most important information for your communication, your plan, your life to be successful must be first, at the top. Additional information that's helpful and nice to have, you should be able to cut from the bottom, slice this piece of the pyramid off, slice this piece of the pyramid off. If only the top remains, that you have successfully met your intention, that you can stop at any time and your point has come across. That is what forced prioritization is about. It's not that this information in the middle isn't important, and certainly there are details that would be great to have, illustrative details, but you have to choose your most important piece. So what if my class, for example, my classes tend to be 3.5, 4 hours in the evening, what if my class were cut in half? Could I cut from the bottom of my agenda and make sure that if I got in only one lesson, that the most important lesson comes first? That's a great question. And it's not easy, particularly for knowledge experts. It's painful, in fact. It feels like you're being squeezed. It feels like you're being forced to make a choice, and you are. What is the most important point? What is the most deliverable, easily communicated core idea that your employee, that your trainee, that your student, that your child, that your spouse can take away from what you're trying to communicate. And it's not just about simple. Simple, yes, but also compact and concrete, meaning you can describe it somehow with your five senses. So I'll use strategic management again as an example. Strategic management, I posit, is like Google Maps for your business's growth. Okay? It is simple. It's like Google Maps for your business's growth. It's compact. The entire intention of my 11-week quarter fits into one sentence. And it's concrete. This audience knows Google Maps backwards and forwards. They understand the intention for growth. Okay? So I just used what's called a schema. And what is a schema? Very simple. Fancy word, simple idea. It's a metaphor or an analogy. It means that you're building on something that's already known to your audience to explain something new. So here's an example. Oh, actually, one other thing. It's not always scientifically accurate, okay? You're building sequencing into knowledge. So as that person or that trainee's knowledge builds, so does their ability to think in more complex terms. Let's take this example, right? Finally getting to the example. A child is reading, right? I'm going to compare reading to fiber. So let's say that reading is like fiber for the mind. That's an analogy. Reading and fiber have nothing in common. In fact, it's unexpected to think of reading as fiber, right? And notice here my attention to audience. So if I had said to someone in their mid-60s, early 70s that reading is fiber for the mind, not very unexpected. You think about fiber when you're that age. If I had said this to a teenager, they'd be maybe rolling their eyes, certainly not remembering my message. I chose to speak here to moms with young children. Why? Because moms with young children are concerned about their children's nutrition. They're thinking about it for them. In addition, they're concerned about their children's education. Two very core ideas to being a parent, not often paired together. So in this case, although reading has nothing to do with fiber, there's nothing in our neural pathways that, like fiber in our stomachs, breaks up toxins or breaks up waste and makes it flow through your brain. But I can talk about the idea of assumptions being broken apart. I can talk about the idea of new pathways being created from the exercise that our brain is getting, from the cleansing that it's getting from our reading. I can talk about new ideas and fresh perspectives being brought to a child's mind, all because reading is like fiber for the mind, right? So do I have your attention? Do you understand how a simple idea can be built upon to understand volumes of information? But volumes of information mean nothing to a trainee, an employee, a student, a spouse, a child, if the main core focus of that idea does not stick.